Hello, semasiologistics. Hello. First of all, you were likening women to Nazis. You might say, oh, well, I'd like to back off, and I will allow you and accept that you were backing off, but you were likening them. That's the point of choosing an analogy like that. And if you want to choose an analogy like that and yet make a distinction, fine, but your point is that, Nazis did a lot of good, well, not a lot, but Nazis did some good things. It doesn't mean they're good. Therefore, feminists might still be bad. You are likening them. Okay, and it's a ridiculous likening. There's other analogies you could use, and now you used religious groups, theists as an example. I'll get to that. Now, you said that to convince is the point of argumentation, but not really. Not really. You see, to convince someone, a couple things. First of all, to convince you, I'd have to know your value system. Maybe I could do it, maybe not. Right? And I, in general, don't really feel people, their conception of what's going on is not up to snuff. They need to know what's going on before I can even really communicate some sort of convincing argument where they could be, they couldn't conceive of the conclusion I want them to have, so I just want them to get more information and build up their ability to conceive more complicated things, you see. I only convince people when I really need to. For example, if I'm working with somebody and we need to work on the same thing, it needs to be coherent, then they need to be convinced. Okay, someone like Thunderfoot, I'm not so worried because I don't see us as working on anything together where I have to convince them. And we just need to shine light. Okay, so it's more like when two people come together, A and B, what's the first thing they need to do? Convince each other? That's ridiculous. They need to, define terms. And shed light on where they actually, what's actually going on. And only after that, possibly, can they convince. Okay. I do like to argue. I'd be happy to argue with you, but we would have to go through this process here and define our terms. So I even know that we're talking about the same thing. It's kind of impossible to argue something to somebody when you don't even know you're talking about the same thing. Plus, you go about to convince, okay, I'll give you a technical point there. I am trying to convince somebody because de facto, I'm making arguments and works to convince, and it's not Thunderfoot, it's the audience or other people, isn't it? Wouldn't it be someone else? And you were going, but that's not going to convince the likes of Thunderfoot and me. So maybe I'm trying to convince somebody else. You could also look at it that way. Insofar as I'm talking to you, I'm just trying to shed light on what I believe and you believe and what it all means. We'll see what's convincing about that. If you're going to use Nazis, then you're using Nazis, or drop it. That's what I would say. The paternity leave and the sensitivity, you know what I'm talking about. Feminists are promoting those things. I'm not saying they're the only ones or any of that bullshit. I'm saying in general, what has men's rights activism done for me? I can name actual men's rights that I've gotten more help from women. Is it going to change? Is the men's right movement going to come up and do something? I hope so. It's possible. I mentioned in my video what subjects I think would be good to cover if the issues are really important. Didn't seem to pay attention to those. So now you talked about religion. Religion's part of the humanist coalition as well, and it's done some good things. Like, I personally am a big fan of liberation theology and Catholicism. I think it's accomplished some good things. So what about that? Does that mean religion is good? Yeah, if you're trashing religion, yes, I take anybody that is a humanist and forwarding humanist goals as better of character. I don't really, do they say they believe in God? If they believe in freedom for human beings, I'm probably pretty much okay with them. So yeah, I don't automatically like atheists better than religious people. I would take me some South American Jesuit priests from the 1970s over most of the atheists on YouTube, certainly the popular ones. So that actually just sort of corroborates my point, I think. Individuals defy labels, and when you're using a label, you need to be talking something about some sort of statistics. And yes, there are millions of feminists, and there was a need for women to be able to vote, and we still need a lot of rights in countries where there's no such laws against domestic abuse, and there's no such law that allows that you might have raped your wife because she is your wife, and there's still need for those kind of laws, and it's a faction of humanism to address that. And that's just a fact as far as I'm concerned. So if you want to get to an argument and say, well, I demand you have an argument, and it's kind of funny when you go, well, of course it's an argument and you should be more convincing. Maybe I'm not trying to convince you, but assuming you want to demand the right to call this an argument in a matter of convincing, and I would say, sure, I have convictions, then what are your values? We need to spend even more time talking about sensitivity and things like this. What do you want? Because the feminists might have accomplished things you don't want that I do want, and that would explain our differences, wouldn't it? So, influencing other people, influencing myself, I really think that I'm trying to convince myself, and I'll tell you what thought process I went through to do that. Sounds reasonable. I believe that what we have really is in our democracy, we've got this public dialogue, ideally. And that leads to an illumination of the facts. And that leads to negotiation and voting. Right? So where is the convincing in this? Because I'm trying to get you to vote my way. I know I'm not going to get everybody to vote my way. And that is why I negotiate. For people I think I might not vote the same way, well, maybe there's some sort of a negotiation where my iffy agreement with them can be turned into a yes and a no vote on something that we agree on. And where's the convincing in this? I could try to convince people my facts are right. That's useful. Convincing of facts. That's useful to me. But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about like convincing to vote or convincing that they should accept a particular negotiation. I think that it works. We have a dialogue. It's illuminating. Then we negotiate and vote. Okay, so convincing is not really the primary issue in that schema. It plays a role. You can identify where it might come in, but it is certainly not crucial or primary. So if my criticisms are true or not, if you ask things like, are you fed up, or you raised that issue, and I said, yeah, here's what, and then you go, but you didn't say what fed you up about it. Well, I have said, okay, and the topic in your video was more criticizing about, what's the point? And you act like you don't want to watch them, but you're watching them, so I explained that. So are my criticisms valid? That's something we could discuss. I think we're touching on that, but to really dig into it, we'd have to know what each other's value systems are. We might find that we just don't overlap in our beliefs because of our value systems. So I might de facto try to convince people, but which people is it? And it's people that share my value systems, because people that don't share my values, if someone thinks that there's nothing wrong with stealing, whining about stealing is the problem, and you should just, be tough and pay attention to your stuff. Well, we have different values. I don't expect to convince them that there should be a 5-year penalty for robbery. Okay, so, yeah, and if you're going to liken people to Nazis, you have to own it. Okay, so you want to back off, fine. Don't use the example again then, because that is what that is. You can't use it and go, but I didn't bring up Nazis. You did.